Hello, curious minds, and welcome to a new intellectual journey where words build realities. Today, we will delve into the mind of a giant who attempted to decipher the enigma of an entire nation and ended up explaining the universal human condition to us. We will speak of solitude, of masks, and of fire. We are talking about Octavio Ireneo Paz Lozano, the only Mexican writer awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. But more than just a laureate, he was a seismograph of his time. A man who understood that poetry is not just beauty, but a form of historical and spiritual knowledge. His masterpiece, The Labyrinth of Solitude, remains today an uncomfortable mirror where we look at ourselves to understand who we are. But his legacy goes beyond that essay. Paz was a pilgrim who traveled between French surrealism and Indian mysticism, seeking the reconciliation of opposites. Before we begin, a brief comment. To bring this narration to life, I have used artificial intelligence tools to generate the images you see. Think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and the atmosphere of what we are telling. They will not always be a literal representation, but rather a visual accompaniment for you to let your imagination fly with me. I sincerely hope you enjoy it. Let's start at the beginning, in Mexico City in 1914. Octavio Paz was born in the middle of the Mexican Revolution, an event that would mark his life and his thought. The roar of the cannons and the search for a new social order were the soundtrack of his childhood. His family was a fascinating blend of traditions. His father was a Zapatista lawyer active in the revolution, while his grandfather was a liberal intellectual and novelist. Little Octavio grew up in a house in Mixcoke that he himself would later describe as a ruined fortress. It was in his grandfather's immense library where Paz discovered his true homeland. Between dusty books and antique furniture, he found refuge. Literature became his window to the world, a way to escape the external chaos and the economic decline of his family. This duality between his father's revolutionary action and his grandfather's intellectual contemplation forged his character. Paz understood very young that the pen could be as powerful as the sword. He began writing poetry as a mere teenager, seeking his own voice among the echoes of the great masters. In 1937, a young Paz traveled to Spain in the midst of the Civil War. There, he attended the Congress of Anti-Fascist Writers. This experience was crucial. He saw solidarity firsthand, but he also began to notice the cracks in the ideological dogma of the left. Upon returning to Mexico, the seed of doubt was planted. Paz felt uncomfortable with the socialist realism that dominated Mexican art at the time. He sought a creative freedom that was not subordinated to political propaganda. He wanted poetry to be free. This search took him to the United States and later to Paris. It was abroad, paradoxically, where he began to become obsessed with Mexican identity. Distance granted him the necessary perspective to write the work that would define his career and Mexican sociology. We are talking about The Labyrinth of Solitude, published in 1950. This book is not a simple collection of essays. It is a psychoanalytic x-ray of a people. Paz asks why the Mexican is the way he is, why he hides behind masks. The central thesis is fascinating and painful. Paz argues that the Mexican feels alone not as a general existential condition, but as a historical wound. We are the children of a foundational violation, the conquest, and we live in a defensive and hermetic solitude. Let's analyze the concept of the pachuco that Paz introduces at the beginning of the book. The pachuco is that young Mexican in Los Angeles who doesn't want to be American, but can no longer be completely Mexican either. His extravagant clothing is a form of protection and defiance. Paz tells us that the pachuco has lost his heritage and seeks a new identity through disguise. It is a metaphor for the Mexican condition. We disguise ourselves so that we are not hurt. Hermeticism is our shield against a world we perceive as hostile. Here enters one of the most powerful ideas, the concept of rajars, or cracking open. For the Mexican, opening up is a weakness. The ideal of manhood consists of never cracking. Women are seen as inferior beings according to this macho vision because they are anatomically open. It is a brutal critique. The solitude of the Mexican, according to Paz, is born from this fear of intimacy. If I open up, the other can invade me. That is why our relationships are distant, full of formalisms and exaggerated courtesy. Courtesy is another mask to keep the other at a distance. But there is a moment where the Mexican breaks that solitude, the fiesta. Paz describes the fiesta not as a joyful celebration, but as an explosion. A moment of chaos where time stops and social hierarchies dissolve. In the fiesta, we allow ourselves to be others. The fiesta is a ritual of death and resurrection. We spend what we don't have. We pull out all the stops because we need that chaos to be reborn. It is the only moment where the Mexican opens up, but he opens up violently through the shout and excess. Let's go deeper into the figure of the mother. Paz addresses the myth of La Chingada. La Chingada is the violated mother, metaphorically represented by La Malinche, the indigenous woman who joined Cortez. The Mexican is the hijo de la chingada, the fruit of violence and rejection. This wound causes the Mexican to repudiate his origin. He doesn't want to be Spanish, the violating father, but he doesn't want to be indigenous, the violated mother either. He remains suspended in a limbo of denial. From this, our war cry is born, which is both a curse and a greeting. Paz's genius lies in connecting this psychology with history. The colonial era was an incubation period where these masks solidified. The Mexican Baroque, with its excess of ornaments, is another way of hiding the void, of disguising reality. The Labyrinth of Solitude is not a pessimistic book, though it may seem so. It is an attempt at a diagnosis. Paz believes that only by recognizing these traumas can we overcome them. Solitude is the first step toward communion. We must go through the labyrinth to find the exit. By publishing this book, Paz established himself as Mexico's most important intellectual. But his search did not end in sociology. His true passion was always poetry. For him, poetry was a form of religion without a god, a way to recover lost time. His contact with the surrealists in Paris, especially with André Breton, was fundamental. Surrealism taught him that reason is not everything, that dreams and the unconscious are doors to a higher reality. Paz tropicalized surrealism, joining it with pre-Hispanic mythology. In 1957, he published Sunstone, his most ambitious poem. It is a circular masterpiece. It has 584 hendecassyllables, the same number of days as the synodic cycle of the planet Venus. The very structure of the poem is cosmic time. The poem begins and ends with the same verses: a crystal willow, a poplar of water. This symbolizes that time is not linear as in the West, but cyclical as in the pre-Hispanic world. Everything returns. Love, history, life. Everything is an eternal return. In Sunstone, love is the supreme revolutionary force. For Paz, eroticism is the only thing that takes us out of our individual solitude and connects us with the other. Lovers create a time outside of time, an eternal instant that defies death. The phrase, "the others," all of whom we are, summarizes his ethics. I am not I without the other. Identity is built in relation. The isolated individual does not exist. That is a modern fiction. We are a knot of relationships, and poetry is the language of that bond. But Paz's life took another dramatic turn. In 1962, he was named Mexico's ambassador to India. Those 6 years in the East transformed his thinking. He found in Hinduism and Buddhism echoes of his own intuitions about time and emptiness. In India, he met Marie José Tramini, who would become his second wife and definitive muse. His book, The Monkey Grammarian, is the fruit of this stage. It is a hybrid text between an essay and a poem, where the path to a temple becomes a path toward language. Paz was fascinated by the idea of Buddhist emptiness, not as nothingness, but as potential fullness. He understood that silence is part of the music, and that the white of the page is part of the poem. His writing became more transparent, more philosophical. However, politics pursued him. In 1968, the Tlatelolco massacre occurred. The Mexican government brutally repressed students. Paz, who was the ambassador, could not tolerate it. In an unprecedented act of dignity, he resigned from his post. That resignation cost him dearly. He went from being a respected official to an uncomfortable critic. He returned to Mexico not as a politician, but as an independent intellectual. He founded the magazines Plural and Vuelta, which became trenches for freedom of thought. This is where Paz earned many enemies. He harshly criticized the perfect dictatorship of the PRI, the party that ruled Mexico for 70 years. He called it the philanthropic ogre, a state that feeds you but in exchange demands absolute submission and devours your soul. But Paz didn't just criticize the right. He was also relentless with the dogmatic left. He condemned Stalinism and communist dictatorships in Latin America. This earned him the hatred of many intellectuals who called him a traitor. Paz stood alone in the center. He argued that liberal democracy, with all its flaws, was the only system that allowed for criticism. He said that without freedom, no justice is possible. His stance was that of a disappointed but firm liberal. He believed in dialogue over ideology. Despite the controversies, his literary work continued to grow. His poetry became more reflective. Books like A Tree Within explore the relationship between the body and the landscape. The human body becomes nature, and nature becomes the body. Paz taught us to see the sacred in the everyday. A glass of water, a stone, a tree at sunset. For him, the poet is a translator of the universe. He translates the silence of things into the language of men. It is an almost mystical mission. In 1990, the definitive recognition arrived. The Swedish Academy awarded him the Nobel Prize in Literature. In his speech titled In Search of the Present, Paz summarized his creed. Modernity is not the future, it is the pure present. It is being here and now. He said that we Hispanic Americans are children of tradition and rupture, that our culture is a bridge between the old and new worlds. The Nobel was not just for him. It was a recognition of the complexity and richness of Mexican letters. But life had one last tragedy in store. In 1996, a fire destroyed his apartment. Paz lost a large part of his library, his rare books, his first editions. For a man of letters, this was like losing his memory. It is said that this event accelerated his decline. Seeing the books that had been his companions all his life burn was a devastating blow. He died 2 years later, in 1998. Mexico lost its most lucid thinker. Octavio Paz's legacy is immense and complex. He left us tools to think about ourselves. He taught us that identity is not something fixed, but something invented every day. That we are historical beings, but also poetic beings. His concept of otherness remains vital in an increasingly polarized world. Paz reminds us that the other is not my enemy, the other is my complement. Without the look of the other, I do not exist. It is a lesson in humility and coexistence. He also left us a warning about power. The intellectual must not serve the prince. His duty is criticism. Paz maintained good independence at a very high personal cost. He taught us that the truth is often lonely and uncomfortable. Revisiting the labyrinth of solitude today is to discover that many of our masks are still there. Perhaps they have changed shape, but the fear of opening up persists. Violence and machismo remain ghosts that haunt our society. But the fiesta also persists, the ability to celebrate life despite death. The overflowing creativity of the Mexican is the other side of that solitude. Paz knew how to see the light within the darkness. He knew that in the labyrinth there are also flowers. His poetry is a refuge. Reading Sunstone is to enter a trance where time stops. It is to remember that love is possible, and that the word has power. Paz believed that naming things is creating them. By naming us, he made us exist. Octavio Paz was a man of contradictions. He was revolutionary and conservative, Mexican and cosmopolitan, poet and essayist. But in those contradictions lies his richness. He did not seek easy answers, he sought deep questions. His life spanned almost the entire 20th century. He was a witness to its horrors and its wonders. His work is a testimony to that violent and creative century. To read him is to read the history of our time through the eyes of a poet. He is often criticized for his final political positions, but reducing him to that is a mistake. One must read him in full. One must debate with him. Paz did not want silent disciples. He wanted critical interlocutors. He wanted us to think for ourselves. The Double Flame is one of his last books, an essay on love and eroticism. There he tells us that love is the highest gamble against death. That loving is the only way to transcend our biological finitude. It is a final message of hope. Paz understood that science explains how the world works, but only poetry explains what it feels like to live in it. He vindicated poetic knowledge in an era dominated by technology. He reminded us that we are beings of symbols and metaphors. His translation of Japanese and Chinese poets also opened windows for us to other sensibilities. Paz was a universal bridge. He brought us the haiku and the tantra, and he took the exuberance of the Mexican Baroque to the world. He was a customs officer of culture. Imagine for a moment Paz writing in his studio. The smoke from his cigarette, the dim light, the silence. In that intimate space, ideas were gestating that would shake nations. The writer's solitude became communion with the reader. He used to say that poetry is the memory of the future. That is to say, within the verses is contained a wisdom that will be ahead of its time. And he was right. His warnings about fanaticism and the loss of identity are more relevant today than ever. Paz invites us to be modern without forgetting our roots. Tradition is not a deadweight, it is a springboard. To be truly universal, we first have to be deeply ourselves. That is the paradox he resolved. His relationship with Mexico City was one of love and hate. He called it a city of palaces and a city of nightmares. He saw how the urban sprawl grew and devoured the transparent landscape of his childhood. His work is also an elegy for that lost city. The concept of ninganir, or nobodying, is another gem of his analysis. Making someone less than no one. Turning them into nobody. It is the supreme form of Mexican psychological violence. Ignoring the other, denying their existence. Paz gave a name to that invisible cruelty. But against nobodying, he opposed communion. Against silence, the word. Against the mask, the authentic face. His whole life was a struggle against nothingness. A struggle to affirm that we do exist, that we are worth something, that we do have a story. Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, The Traps of Faith, is his monumental study of the nun poet. There, Paz projects himself. He analyzes how ecclesiastical power silenced a brilliant intellectual. It is a mirror of his own struggle against political power. By rescuing Sor Juana, Paz rescued female intelligence in a world of men. He recognized in her the first great poet of America. It was an act of historical justice that redefined our literary canon forever. Paz taught us that criticism begins with oneself. The critic who does not question himself is an imposter. His intellectual honesty led him to rectify many times to change his mind. That is not weakness, it is intelligence in motion. In his short poems, we find the influence of the Japanese haiku. Capturing the instant, a bird sings, and in that song the whole world fits. Paz sought the economy of language, saying the most with the least. The word is not an instrument, It is a living being, he said. Words have memory. They have an electrical charge. The poet is the one who knows how to detonate that energy. Reading Paz is to feel that electricity running down your spine. His vision of history was not linear, but spiral. Errors are repeated, but on another level. That is why he insisted so much on knowing the past. Those who ignore the labyrinth are condemned to get lost in it forever. Octavio Paz did not found a school because he did not want imitators, but his influence is inescapable. All subsequent Mexican writers have to settle scores with him. They either love him or hate him, but they cannot ignore him. He is the inevitable father. His essays on visual art are also brilliant. He wrote about Marcel Duchamp, about Rufino Tamayo. He understood that painting and poetry are sisters. Both seek to make the invisible visible. His critical eye was as sharp as his pen. Modernity for Paz was a sentence and an opportunity. We are condemned to be modern, he said. We cannot go back. But we can humanize that modernity. We can inject soul into the machine of progress. In his final years, he worried about ecological deterioration. He saw that limitless progress was destroying the planet. His poetry became a song to the threatened earth. He was a precursor of environmental consciousness from the perspective of literature. Fire is a recurring symbol in his work. The fire that creates and that destroys. Amorous passion is fire. Revolution is fire. The word is fire. Paz was the guardian of that flame. His work burns but is not consumed. Let's remember his voice. A slow, elegant, firm voice. In interviews, he spoke in perfect sentences as if he were dictating a book. He was a born orator, a master of rhetoric who seduced with intelligence. His controversy with Subcomandante Marcos in the 90s showed his final disconnection with certain new realities, but also his coherence. He did not believe in weapons as a path for change. He died believing in the democratic word. Today, in the 21st century, what does Paz tell us? He tells us not to let ourselves be trapped by digital tribes. Not to lock ourselves in ideological bubbles. To dare to dialogue with those who think differently. To leave the labyrinth. He tells us that identity is not a prison. Being Mexican or being Latin American is a starting point, not a destination. We can be that and be universal. We can eat tacos and read Kant. There is no contradiction. There is enrichment. Solitude is still there. It's true. Technology sometimes isolates us more. But Paz reminds us that poetry, literature, and art are Ariadne's threads. They are the threads that guide us toward the exit, toward the encounter with the other. Octavio Paz was not a saint. He was a man with an ego, with passions, with mistakes, but he was a man who lived with his eyes open. And that lucidity is his gift. He lent us his eyes to better see our own country and our own souls. His work is an invitation to an intellectual adventure. To not settle for easy answers. To doubt. To explore. To feel. Paz is a constant challenge to our mental laziness. He is an alarm clock ringing in the middle of the night. In every poem of his, there is a heartbeat. The heartbeat of a man who loved life desperately, who sought meaning in a chaotic world, and who sometimes, only sometimes, managed to touch the absolute with his fingertips. Thus, we close this chapter on the architect of solitude. Octavio Paz, the poet who made Mexico a universal metaphor. The thinker who stripped us bare to clothe us in truth. His labyrinth remains open, waiting for new travelers. I hope this journey has ignited a spark in you, that you feel encouraged to open the labyrinth of solitude or to recite Sunstone. Don't take my word for it. Read him. The direct experience with his work is irreplaceable. Culture is an infinite dialogue, and you are part of it. Don't let anyone tell you what to think. Use the tools left to us by these giants to build your own judgment. That is true freedom. Thank you for joining me in this deep dive. It has been an honor to be your guide through the corridors of this brilliant mind. If you value this type of rigorous and passionate content, your support is fundamental for us to keep creating. If this journey through the labyrinth of identity and poetry has ignited a spark in you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel for more explorations. Comment below on what your favorite verse by Paz is, or what you think about our shared solitude. Don't forget to give it a like if you enjoyed the video and share it with those friends who love good conversations. Remember that curiosity is the engine of the world. Let's keep asking, let's keep reading, let's keep searching. I am your companion on this journey of knowledge. See you in the next analysis to continue unraveling the mysteries of philosophy, history, and art. Until next time, restless minds. And remember, as Paz said, light is time thinking itself. Let us be light.